First Contact and Challenge. The Valaxian ships appeared like frozen auroras in Earth's atmosphere, their crystalline structures casting prismatic rainbows across city skies worldwide. They arrived during the peak of rush hour, when humanity was caught in its daily dance of commuting and commerce. 12 massive vessels, each shaped like geometric fractals, positioned themselves above major population centers, their surfaces shifting and flowing like liquid glass. For the first 6 hours, they remained silent. Global markets froze. Military bases worldwide went to high alert. Social media exploded with theories, fears, and hopes. Then, at exactly 3:47 p.m. Universal Time Coordinated, every screen on Earth, from smartphones to billboards, displayed the same message in perfect local translation. We seek the strongest of Earth. Show us your might. In the halls of power, chaos erupted. The United Nations Security Council convened an emergency session within the hour. Ambassador Reena Patel of India stood at the podium, her voice steady despite the tension. Our nuclear capabilities and military strength must be demonstrated immediately. We cannot appear weak before these visitors. Ambassador Marcus Thompson of Britain disagreed. If they wanted to attack, they would have done so already. Their technology clearly surpasses ours, they're not here for our weapons. The debate raged on, but Professor Olivia Blackwood of Oxford University's Xenolinguistics department noticed something peculiar about the message. Working from her cramped office, surrounded by ancient texts and modern holographic displays, she began breaking down the linguistic patterns of the alien transmission. The Valaxians watched as humanity scrambled to respond. China launched its most impressive military parade in history. The United States demonstrated its latest AI-driven defense systems. Russia showcased its hypersonic missiles. Each display was met with the same response: silence. Meanwhile, in a small observatory in Chile, Dr. Rafael Montoya made a startling discovery. The crystalline ships weren't just hovering, they were scanning. Their prismatic surfaces emitted complex patterns of light that swept across the planet's surface like invisible fingers. They're looking for something specific, he reported to the International Scientific Coalition, but it's not what we think. These scans pass right through our military installations, our power plants, our technological centers. They're focusing on people. The Valaxians' second message came 2 weeks after their arrival: your demonstrations are noted. They do not show what we seek. Global frustration mounted. President Helen Morrison of the United States addressed the nation: we have shown these visitors every measure of our strength, every achievement of our civilization. What more could they want? The answer began to emerge in unexpected places. The alien ships started dispatching smaller crystalline probes, each about the size of a basketball. These probes ignored military bases and government buildings, instead hovering near hospitals, schools, community centers, and disaster relief operations. In the aftermath of a devastating earthquake in Peru, a probe followed emergency responders as they worked tirelessly to save lives. In a drought-stricken village in Ethiopia, another observed as communities shared their last reserves of water. In Tokyo, a probe watched a group of strangers form a human chain to save a child from a flooding river. Professor Blackwood's breakthrough came after 3 weeks of relentless analysis. We've been interpreting their language through our cultural lens, she explained to an emergency UN session. In their syntax, the concept of might is intrinsically linked to collective action and emotional resonance. They don't separate physical strength from moral strength or individual power from community cooperation. As her words echoed through the chamber, the Valaxians' third message appeared: we begin to see. Your true might hides not in your weapons, but in your unity. The test begins tomorrow. The crystalline ships pulsed with new intensity, their light shows transforming from cool blues to warm golds. Humanity held its breath, finally beginning to understand that the strength these advanced beings sought had nothing to do with military power or technological achievement. As the sun set on this last day before the test, people worldwide wondered what trials awaited them, and whether they would finally be able to show these visitors the true nature of human strength. Around the globe, communities began to prepare, not by stockpiling weapons or activating defense systems, but by coming together. Something profound was about to begin, and humanity was about to discover that its greatest power lay not in its ability to destroy, but in its capacity to unite. The failed demonstrations. The test began with silence. The Valaxian probes, which had been passively observing for weeks, suddenly multiplied. Thousands of crystalline spheres descended from the mother ships, each emitting a soft, pulsing light that seemed to beat in rhythm with the human heart. At the International Science Center in Geneva, Dr. Isabella Romano watched the readings with growing fascination. "They're creating some kind of energy field," she reported, her eyes fixed on the quantum fluctuation meters. "But it's unlike anything we've ever seen. It's not destructive, it's transformative." The first change became apparent when military forces worldwide attempted to track the probes. Every targeting system, from the most basic radar to the most sophisticated quantum tracking devices, simply failed to lock on. The probes weren't jamming the systems, they were somehow existing in a state that made technological intervention impossible. Admiral James O'Connor of the Pacific Fleet stared at his useless monitors in frustration. "It's as if they're operating on a completely different plane of reality," he muttered to his staff. "Everything we've built, everything we've developed, it's meaningless against their technology." But the Valaxians weren't interested in military installations. Their probes gathered above areas of human concentration, hospitals, schools, disaster zones, and community centers. Each probe created what became known as a sphere of influence, a space where human technology gradually ceased to function, but human capabilities remained unchanged. In New Delhi, Dr. Arjun Kapoor made a breakthrough observation. "The spheres don't disable technology randomly," he explained during an emergency broadcast. "They create environments where only genuine human effort can succeed. They're not testing our tools, they're testing us." The global response was chaotic. Governments scrambled to demonstrate alternative forms of strength. China assembled thousands of athletes to perform synchronized demonstrations of physical prowess. The European Union orchestrated massive humanitarian aid operations. The United States launched a campaign showcasing individual tales of human achievement. Yet the Valaxian response remained the same: silence. Then, in a small town in Brazil, something remarkable happened. When a probe's influence sphere encompassed a local hospital, all electronic equipment ceased functioning. Instead of panicking, the medical staff adapted. Dr. Lucia Santos led her team in performing a complex surgery using only basic tools and their combined expertise. The probe's light changed color for the first time, shifting from cool blue to warm gold. Similar incidents began occurring worldwide. In a Russian mining town, when machinery failed, generations of mining families came together, using traditional methods passed down through centuries to rescue trapped workers. In Kenya, when modern irrigation systems failed, elders taught young people ancient water management techniques that had sustained their ancestors. Professor Blackwood's team made another linguistic breakthrough. Their latest transmissions contain a recurring phrase we initially mistranslated, she announced. "We thought they were saying, 'Show us your might,' but a more accurate translation would be 'Reveal your essence.'" The Valaxians' fourth message arrived: "Your machines are extensions, not strength. Show us what lies beneath." Dr. Romano's readings revealed something extraordinary. "The probes aren't just observing," she reported. "They're measuring something far more subtle than physical energy. They respond to patterns of human cooperation, to moments of collective problem-solving, to instances of knowledge sharing between generations." In downtown Toronto, a probe sphere encompassed a busy intersection just as all traffic systems failed. Instead of descending into chaos, the community organized itself. A group of strangers, led by a retired traffic officer named Michael Thompson, created an impromptu system of hand signals and human chains to keep people moving safely. The probe's response was immediate. Its light shifted to a brilliant gold, and for the first time, it emitted a sound, a harmonious tone that resonated with everyone who heard it. As the second week of testing concluded, humanity began to understand. The Valaxians weren't impressed by displays of military might or technological advancement. They watched with indifference as nations paraded their weapons and wealth. But when ordinary people came together, adapting and cooperating in the face of challenges, the probes responded with increasing intensity. A subtle shift began to occur in human society. Communities started organizing themselves differently, preparing not for war or competition, but for cooperation. The spheres of influence were no longer seen as tests to be overcome, but as opportunities to demonstrate what humans could achieve together. The Valaxians' fifth message appeared as Part 2 drew to a close. Now we begin to see your true form. The final test approaches. Around the world, people braced themselves, not with fear, but with a growing understanding. The greatest demonstration of strength wouldn't come from armies or machines, but from the fundamental human capacity to adapt, cooperate, and overcome challenges together. Unexpected heroes. The final test began without warning. In a synchronized movement that spanned the globe, every Valaxian probe expanded its sphere of influence to 10 times its original size. Within seconds, nearly 40% of Earth's populated areas fell under their effect. Technology didn't just fail, it ceased to exist within these zones, transformed into inert matter. The world watched in awe as the crystalline mother ships rearranged themselves into a complex geometric pattern above Earth, forming what Dr. Romano later termed the celestial crown. In the technology-dead zones, something extraordinary began to unfold. Rather than chaos, a new order emerged, one based on human ingenuity and cooperation. The first sign came from an unexpected place, a retirement home in Auckland, New Zealand. When the facility's medical equipment transformed into harmless lumps of silicon and metal, nurse practitioner Tom Wilson didn't panic. Instead, he mobilized the elderly residents themselves. Former doctors and nurses, some of whom hadn't practiced in decades, began sharing their pre-digital medical knowledge. They created a system of care based on experience, touch, and observation. "We've forgotten that medicine existed before machines," said 82-year-old retired physician Dr. Grace Henderson, as she taught younger staff members how to diagnose pneumonia using just their ears and hands. Sometimes, the old ways are the strongest. The Valaxian probe above the facility pulsed with unprecedented intensity. Similar scenes played out across the globe. In Mumbai's bustling marketplace, when digital payment systems failed, the community revived an ancient system of credit based on trust and collective responsibility. Led by fruit vendor Priya Ranganathan, merchants and customers created a complex web of mutual support that kept commerce flowing. "Money is just a symbol," Priya explained to gathered observers. "Trust is the real currency." The probe monitoring the market began emitting a harmonic tone that made everyone who heard it feel inexplicably hopeful. In Cairo, when water distribution systems failed, 19-year-old Hamza Khalil remembered his grandfather's stories about ancient Egyptian water management techniques. Organizing his neighbors, he helped establish a new distribution network based on gravity-fed channels and community cooperation. The system not only worked, it proved more efficient than the mechanical one it replaced. Professor Blackwood's team made another crucial discovery about the Valaxian language. Their word for test is the same as their word for revelation, she announced. "They're not testing us, they're helping us reveal something to ourselves." The truth of her words became evident as communities worldwide adapted to life without technology. In rural Finland, a group of teenagers taught by their grandparents organized a network of message runners, reviving ancient Nordic traditions of community communication. In Bolivia, indigenous elders led their communities in returning to traditional farming methods that proved surprisingly effective. The Valaxians' next message appeared as a shimmering hologram visible even within the technology dead zones: "Your strength grows clearer. Show us more." Dr. Romano's instruments, operating outside the affected areas, detected something remarkable. "The probes aren't just observing our activities," she reported. "They're measuring the strength of human connections, literally quantifying our capacity for cooperation and adaptation." In Vancouver, a probe sphere encompassed the city's busiest hospital just as a major earthquake struck. Without modern equipment, the medical staff adapted instantly. Dr. Nathan Park organized a human chain that stretched for 2 miles, passing supplies and information between the hospital and outlying clinics. Surgeons performed operations by candlelight, using techniques passed down through generations of medical knowledge. The probe's response was unlike anything seen before. It created a display of light so beautiful that witnesses wept at the sight. But perhaps the most profound transformation occurred in the minds and hearts of people worldwide. As communities rediscovered their innate capabilities, a new kind of confidence emerged. It wasn't based on technological superiority or military might, but on the fundamental human capacity to adapt, cooperate, and overcome challenges together. A small farming community in Kenya demonstrated this transformation perfectly. When their modern agricultural equipment failed, instead of despairing, they organized an intergenerational knowledge exchange. Elders taught young people traditional farming techniques while younger members contributed their understanding of climate patterns and soil science. The resulting hybrid approach proved more sustainable than either method alone. The Valaxians' response was immediate. The probe above the community split into thousands of tiny crystals, each one reflecting the light of human cooperation in a dazzling display. As Part 3 concluded, humanity began to understand that this wasn't just a test of survival or adaptation. It was an opportunity to rediscover something essential about themselves, something that had been gradually obscured by their reliance on technology and artificial divisions. The Valaxians' final message of this phase appeared: "The true revelation approaches. Prepare to show us your ultimate form." Around the world, people took a deep breath, ready for whatever came next. They had learned that their greatest strength lay not in their machines or weapons, but in their capacity to come together and face challenges as one human family. The Great Test. The ultimate test began at dawn. The Valaxian motherships suddenly emitted a pulse of light that circled the globe like a luminous wave. When it passed, every piece of advanced technology on Earth, from quantum computers to simple calculators, transformed into transparent crystal. From the International Science Center's backup facility, operating on pre-digital technology, Dr. Romano made a stunning announcement: "They haven't destroyed our technology. They've transformed it into a medium for something else, a global network of crystalline resonance." The transformed devices began to glow with an inner light, each one pulsing in harmony with human heartbeats nearby. Through this crystalline network, the Valaxians delivered their most challenging message yet: "Now show us how you face your greatest fears." Within hours, the purpose of the transformation became clear. The crystalline network began projecting humanity's collective fears into reality, not as physical threats, but as shared experiences that communities had to face together. In London, the city found itself experiencing a simulation of complete resource depletion. Rather than panicking, neighborhoods organized themselves into support networks. Former stock trader Richard Blackley used his knowledge of resource management to help coordinate the sharing of supplies across the city. "In the financial world, we optimized for profit," he said, directing a volunteer group. "Now we're optimizing for survival, and discovering that sharing resources actually creates more abundance than hoarding them." The Valaxian probes recorded everything, their lights shifting through spectrums never seen before on Earth. In Osaka, Japan, the crystalline network simulated a complete breakdown of social order. Instead of chaos, something remarkable emerged. Led by retired teacher Yuki Tanaka, the community created new systems of cooperation that transcended traditional social boundaries. Age groups that rarely interacted began working together, sharing skills and support. We thought we needed rules and technology to maintain order, Yuki observed, watching young professionals and elderly residents collaborate on a community support system. What we really needed was to remember our connection to each other. The probe monitoring Osaka began to resonate with a frequency that made plants grow at accelerated rates, transforming bare concrete into gardens. Professor Blackwood made another breakthrough in understanding the Valaxian language. Their word for fear is the same as their word for potential, she reported from her crystal-transformed office. They believe our greatest fears mark the boundaries of our greatest growth. This insight proved prophetic as communities worldwide faced their simulated challenges. In Rio de Janeiro, when faced with a simulation of devastating climate change, the city's favelas and wealthy neighborhoods finally broke down their social barriers, creating a unified response that drew on the wisdom and resources of all citizens. The Valaxians' next message rippled through the crystalline network: your fears do not weaken you. They show you where you must grow. In Moscow, the simulation created a scenario where all forms of communication broke down. The community's response was unexpected. They developed a new form of connection based on empathy and shared experience. Led by street artist Nina Petrova, people began using art, music, and dance to convey complex messages across cultural and linguistic barriers. The probe above Moscow fragmented into thousands of tiny crystals, each one capturing and amplifying these new forms of human connection. Dr. Romano's primitive instruments detected something extraordinary. The crystalline network isn't just simulating scenarios, she reported. It's actually measuring humanity's capacity for collective growth. Each time we transform fear into cooperation, the network's resonance frequency elevates. The most profound transformation occurred in a small town in Brazil. When faced with a simulation of complete isolation, the community, led by fisherman João Santos, created a system of mutual support that turned strangers into family. They proved that human connection could thrive even in the darkest circumstances. We thought we were being tested on how we handle fear, João said, as his community gathered for a shared meal. Instead, we're being shown how fear can transform into strength when we face it together. As Part 4 drew to a close, the Valaxian probes began to pulse in synchronization worldwide. The crystalline network hummed with a frequency that seemed to resonate with the human spirit itself. People everywhere felt a growing sense that they were on the brink of something momentous. The Valaxians' final message of this phase shimmered through every transformed crystal: you approach understanding. Prepare for the ultimate revelation. Humanity held its breath, knowing that everything they had learned about strength, fear, and connection was leading to this moment. The true nature of the test, and perhaps of human potential itself, was about to be revealed. Unity's triumph. The final revelation began not with a display of light or a global message, but with absolute stillness. Every Valaxian probe, every transformed crystal, every mothership suspended in Earth's atmosphere simply stopped. For one breathless moment, the world fell into perfect silence. Then, the crystalline network began to sing. It wasn't music in any traditional sense, but rather the harmonic resonance of every human heartbeat on Earth, transformed into pure light and sound. Dr. Romano, working with her primitive equipment, made the final breakthrough. They've created a circuit, she announced, her voice trembling with awe. Not of electricity or data, but of human consciousness itself. Every transformed piece of technology is acting as a node in a global network of human experience. The Valaxians' true purpose finally became clear. Through their crystalline network, every human on Earth could feel, not just intellectually understand, but physically experience, their connection to every other human being. Barriers of language, culture, and geography dissolved in an instant. In that moment, a hospital nurse in Tokyo could feel the determination of a firefighter in Mexico City. A farmer in Kenya shared the insight of a teacher in Norway. A child in Australia experienced the wisdom of an elder in Alaska. The entire human race became aware of itself as a single, living entity. Professor Blackwood, experiencing the connection like everyone else, managed to document her final linguistic revelation: their word for species is the same as their word for individual. They weren't testing humanity, they were helping us achieve unity consciousness. Through this unprecedented connection, humanity began to understand itself in entirely new ways. Every act of kindness, every moment of courage, every instance of innovation became part of a shared experience that elevated the entire species. The Valaxians' final message resonated not through screens or speakers, but directly through human consciousness: you have always been mighty. You needed only to remember your true nature. In that moment, the transformed technology began to revert to its original form, but something had fundamentally changed. The experience of unity had left an indelible mark on the human psyche. People who had felt the connection could never again see themselves as truly separate from their fellow humans. Dr. Romano's last readings before her equipment returned to normal showed something extraordinary. The resonance frequency of human consciousness has been permanently elevated, she reported. We've evolved, not through biological mutation, but through the expansion of our collective awareness. Around the world, the effects of this evolution became immediately apparent. International conflicts ceased as former enemies remembered the experience of feeling each other's hopes and fears. Economic systems began to transform as people who had felt each other's struggles couldn't ignore inequity. Environmental initiatives gained unprecedented support as humanity's connection to the planet itself had become clear through their moment of unified consciousness. The Valaxian motherships began to ascend, their final message echoing in humanity's collective memory: you have passed not just our test, but your own. Earth is now ready to join the galactic community, not as a primitive species seeking protection, nor as a military power demanding respect, but as a unified consciousness capable of understanding the true nature of universal strength. As the ships disappeared into the cosmos, they left behind a single crystalline structure hovering above the United Nations building in New York. Within it, encoded in a language humanity could now understand, were the coordinates and protocols for joining the Galactic Council of Unified Species. Dr. Romano, Professor Blackwood, and their colleagues would spend years studying the changes that occurred during humanity's transformation. They documented how communities maintained their sense of connection even without the crystalline network, how people developed new forms of communication based on empathy and shared experience, and how human society reorganized itself around principles of cooperation rather than competition. But perhaps the most profound change was the simplest: people everywhere remembered what it felt like to be truly unified, to experience the strength that comes not from domination or technological superiority, but from the fundamental interconnectedness of all human consciousness. The story of how humanity proved its might became a cornerstone of Earth's new history, not as a tale of military power or technological achievement, but as the moment when an entire species remembered its true nature and took its first steps into a larger universe, forever changed by the understanding that the greatest power in the cosmos lies not in the ability to destroy or dominate, but in the capacity to unite, to grow, and to transform fear into collective evolution. As Earth prepared for its new role in the galactic community, people everywhere carried with them the ultimate lesson of the Valaxian test: true strength lies not in what we can achieve alone, but in what we can become together. The end.